just a quick news bite. I mean, yeah, that works. News bite. We can call it a news bite. I've been following the Flint, Michigan story. This has to do with the water. If you remember, an emergency manager that was appointed by the governor switched over Flint's water to the lake without having sufficient chemicals or sufficient precautions. And in doing so, sorts of corrosive materials started to go into people's homes. It started to infect people's drinking water. Now, the residents, for the most part, have been in a situation where they've been bathing in this stuff and they've been drinking this stuff. And it was a period of time where, they were doing this without any kind of intervention. When they finally tested the lead levels, we found that in various houses, the lead levels was astronomical. We even found that after the fact, that there was cover-up, maybe too strong, but let's just say that the local government wasn't necessarily being on the up and up in regards to the way the testing was conducted in order to give an answer, at least based on the reporting by Jordan. And good news for the residents, though. In mind, this is good news. This is almost like a bright spot within the bad. If you had a kid that was being raised in this area, let's say you had a kid that was 3, 4, 5, that kid was drinking that lead-laced water. That kid could have developmental issues for the rest of his life. If you were bathing in that stuff, you could have sores. There were residents that were reporting having sores, having illnesses that wasn't necessarily there before. And I agree that by some probability, you can't necessarily associate all of these things with the water. But considering what was taking place in Flint, Michigan, and considering what we know of what was in that water, it seems like those things are related to one another. Well, a federal judge has allowed the residents of Flint to sue the EPA. The point is, the EPA didn't protect those residents in the way it was supposed to protect those residents. And as such, those residents have been given a green light to sue the government. Sue the government. Good on them. Some of those people are going to have medical issues for the rest of their life. Some of those kids, some of those parents. You already have people in an area that's dirt poor. And in being that's dirt poor, they have these other now medical anomalies that they have to deal with. Yeah, good on them. Good on them. And just to show the basics of the story. The EPA was well aware that the Flint River was highly corrosive and posed a significant danger of lead leaching into residents' homes. A federal judge recently determined that residents of Flint, Michigan have the right to file lawsuits against the United States Environmental Protection Agency for failing to immediately intervene on their behalf. Understand, government is not a corporation. The goal of the government is not to maximize profit. The goal of the government is to do things that are in the interest of the public itself. Yes, to maintain order, but also, at least based on our Constitution, work for the well-being of the population. Working in the interest and the well-being of the population sometimes demands spending money for that well-being of that population, especially if you're talking about healthcare or environmental protection, meaning regulations, rules. It prevents dumping and protects the environment itself, or protects the people within that system. Like, for example, why do you think we have people checking animals to ensure that there's nothing wrong with the animal when we're serving it to eat? Why do you think we have people checking the water to ensure that it's not laced or contaminated with lead, or checking the air? The government has a vested interest in ensuring the well-being of the population of the citizenry. In this very specific instance, saving money in a poor community. It's a poor community. It's a throwaway community. They didn't care all that much about it. But in trying to save money, they switched over the water supply, and as such, allowed that population to be exposed to something that population shouldn't have been exposed to. They have a vested interest in ensuring that didn't happen. And the point that the judge is making is that the EPA failed in their task. And as such, if the people who are there, who are the residents, can show that they were materially harmed by what had taken place, they should be able to sue the government, especially since the government in this case dropped the ball. Yes, it's a bright spot. I mean, after all, this was somewhat of a throwaway community. I remember in the debates in 2016 when the residents asked the candidates, what can you do about this? I mean, they have us drinking water laced with lead. Are you telling me that the government that's the richest on the planet can't ensure that the people in its society can't drink clean water, is not drinking clean water? And I have to be honest, the answers of Sanders and the answers of Clinton was lacking. I mean, their thing was that's a local issue, but that's not the answer that you give to people who are Terrified. Terrified. So I'm going to end this. This one wasn't meant to be long. This was just a short one. I have one that's coming up next that I may linger a little bit longer with it. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through Patreon. And yeah, this is a bright spot. I covered the story once before that Jordan was covering with Flint residents, including Flint 5 years later. That place looks like a war zone. It's one of the throwaway areas of America. And as such, they didn't all that much care to ensure that the water that those people were drinking was legit. Well, hopefully, they could get some, not necessarily punitive, but at the very least, ensure, no, punitive also. Because it needs to be a situation where it hurts enough where they don't necessarily do this again, that no other locality does this. But at the very least, I get some semblance. I don't like to say justice, but some semblance of justice. I'll leave it here. Thanks all.